If you monitor now our promotion rates, our selection rates for schools, we're in darn good shape. In most areas, we are above Army average. This will continue. I know that in 1992, many changes are going to take place as we find this new equilibrium in the Army, as we reduce our strength, as we find changes and we make changes in various structures. But once it settles down, I think you'll find a good Army, an effective Army, with opportunities that are no worse and in all probability better than they have been in the recent past. And Special Forces will be the leading edge of this effort. We will continue to do some challenging training to standards, mettle, and based on a doctrinal foundation. You have to understand doctrine in order to train effectively. If you do not understand doctrine, then it's doubtful that what you're doing out there is correct. Doctrine is not a directive. Doctrine is an authoritative statement based on experience and study that tells you how things ought to be done. So you need to take that doctrine, temper it with some common sense, and apply it, regardless where we're training. I'm hoping that leaders and commanders will have the manuals and make the time to study our doctrine. Because if you do not understand the doctrine, it's like trying to play music, trying to play an instrument without understanding notes and all the basic fundamentals dealing with melody and rhythm and all that. You have to understand doctrine. I cannot overemphasize that. And like everything else, we're not going to be out there doing it alone. We're part of a team effort, working with the Army, with the Navy, the Air Force in a joint arena, in an interagency with other governmental agencies, and with other coalition forces. This requires us to have a good understanding of what our responsibilities are, but also understand what the other agencies, Army, Navy, Air Force, other federal agencies, what their agenda is, what their requirements, and their limitations and capabilities. Because we'll be doing things as part of a team and not be going it alone. I would like to take for a minute and clarify the mission of the Special Forces Command. I'm stating the mission slightly differently, as it is normally spelled out in a TDA or some other documents which talks about training and readiness and validating and certifying and what have you, and equipping the force. I broke the mission down into 5 elements. That's our priorities. Number 1 is readiness. Readiness. And we achieve readiness to a realistic training, demanding training, trained to standards and mettle, based on doctrine. But the bottom line is readiness. Training is the process. It's the process to which we achieve readiness. But the bottom line is readiness. And so I monitor all the reports associated with readiness very, very closely, because that is the bottom line. Just like in a business, where people look at it and say, how successful is the business? They look at the profit and loss statement. Did you make a profit? Well, we're not in business. Ours is a different type of activity. And just like a large business concern, any business concern looks at the profit, for us, it equates to readiness. And just like a business that does not make a profit is a failure, so is an organization that is not able to achieve readiness. So readiness is one of them. Number 2 is taking care of soldiers. Now, I pulled this thing out because it's normally stated, well, we understand we need to take care of soldiers. But I want this to be in the forefront. I want commanders and leaders to understand that taking care of soldiers is their responsibility. Taking care of soldiers is the full spectrum of things. Motivating soldiers, rewarding soldiers, giving them a medal, the efficiency report, and knowing when to discipline a soldier, when you pat him on the back and when you kick him in the butt. That's all part of leadership. It's all part of taking soldiers. Giving them an opportunity to professionally develop. Making sure that the soldier has time off with his family and can attend to personal problems. And when he does have a problem, we're there to help him if he needs and wants help. Now, in order to do that, we have to do more than just sloganeer. We have to do more than just walk around and talk about how we take care of our own. We have to do more than just proclaim ourselves to be concerned leaders. And that more is the fact that you have to understand the system. A good example not too long ago, a soldier was notified by finance that he has been overpaid. And finance wanted to collect from him several $1,000s. He was a specialist with 2 children and a wife in Europe. The dollar wasn't doing so good. And he just didn't have the money. He was living from hand to mouth already. And the last thing he needed is this bill. It troubled him. He was very concerned. He went to his immediate leader and asked for help. And the callous response was, well, you should have known you've been overpaid. I guess you're just going to have to pay the money back. That was basically the response. Well, that soldier was making an appointment to go down to finance, and in doing that, he was coordinating that effort in his orderly room, and he was getting permission from the first sergeant. The first sergeant asked him exactly what the problem was. And then the first sergeant said to him, now listen, there's an alternative. The Army has a program called Remission and Cancellation of Indebtedness. You tell them the story, what happened, how it is impacting on you, it's creating a hardship for you, and the Army is going to take a look at it. There's a regulation on that issue, and a very simple process. He submitted that, the Army looked at it, and it canceled the debt. The reason I tell you that story, because that is part of taking care of soldiers. You have to know the system. You have to know where to go and ask the questions. And that is a responsibility of leaders, to take care of soldiers. I think you probably know what I'm talking about. Taking care of soldiers' families. We somehow manage to feel that that is the responsibility of volunteers. And I'm telling you, in our kind of community, where we spend a considerable amount of time away from our families, in a TDY status on training or on actual operational missions, this is an important element of command, taking care of families. Now, I know you're not the only one in this arena. The installation is involved with ACS and other activities. But a commander and a leader has a responsibility and contributes to this total effort. The unit's family support program should be the best there is in the Army. It takes effort to motivate people to volunteer. But the bottom line is that the family knows when the spouse is away, they can turn to somebody for help and assistance. We in the Army have a tendency to take families and uproot them away from their extended families. And so when an NCO or an officer deploys and leaves the spouse with the children there, the in-laws and the parents and the uncles and the aunts, they're someplace else. Not always easy to find somebody to help you through a difficult period. And the soldier who is deployed on a training mission or an operational mission, he shouldn't have to worry about his family back there. You're going to have a more productive soldier when he is at peace of mind, when he knows that if something goes wrong back there, there's a chain of command. There are leaders back there that'll take care of his family, and they're not out there on their own. That is part of our mission and the mission of this command. And that's our mission, not just mine. It's yours and mine and everybody else that's assigned to this Special Forces Command. Another element, the fourth element, is being quiet professionals. Quiet professionals. You've heard that slogan probably now for a number of years. It was coined by Major General Leroy Suddett many years ago in the early 80s. But sometimes the interpretation and the meaning is different. And I want to make sure you understand what my interpretation is of the quiet professional. A quiet professional, when he's called upon, he goes in and he does the job, and he does it correctly, and he does it in such a fashion that people know they can depend on him. And when he's done, he leaves. He doesn't stand around and brag about it and blow his horn how great he is. He leaves. And the only analogy I can draw is the old stories we used to see concerning the Lone Ranger. And normally when the episode ended, normally one person would turn to somebody else and say, "Who was this masked rider?" And somebody would say, "This was the Lone Ranger." And then there'd be another shot where the Lone Ranger was on his horse, Silver, and the horse would rear up and they would ride away. And that's the image I would like to see Special Forces. People turn and say, "My God, that was a superb job. Who the hell were these guys?" And somebody else says, "These were Special Forces guys." No, the Germans have a saying. It says, "Eigenlob stinkt." Self-praise smells. You're the last guy that needs to blow his horn. If you do a good job, if you're a professional, other people will recognize your talent and recognize your contribution, and they'll blow your horn. And that is the most credible thing that can happen. The last element in our mission is we need to be flexible and we need to be adaptable. Now, being flexible and adaptable, I talked to you before, a little earlier here, about the uncertainties, the ambiguity, the fact that we're not going to be out there working alone with other people. We may not always be in the lead. We may be in a supporting role. In most cases, we will be. When you work with a governmental agency, their agenda and their mission and their requirements are very different than if you were working with the Navy or the Air Force or the Army. You need to understand your role, the contribution you're making to the total effort, and you can only do that if you're flexible and adaptable. So those are the 5 elements in our mission that I'm asking you to take note of and to get behind and support, because it is our mission, yours as well as mine. Now let me talk a little bit about Special Forces. And I would like to introduce this subject with a little story and analogy. They'll possibly clarify what I'm talking about. You know, we have all kinds of balls out there. There are tennis balls, basketballs, baseballs. You know, I could go on and on. And if you take a look at a golf ball, you know, not all golf balls are the same. And the analogy I want to draw is that we have all kinds of forces out there that equate to balls. We have mechanized, light infantry, armor, signal, all kinds of forces out there in the Army, as well as the Navy and the Air Force. All kinds of balls. And then we have Special Operation Forces. Special Operation Forces are not special forces. Special Operation Forces is made up of a number of different kind of skills, and Special Forces is just part of that Special Operation Force. And so it is with golf balls. On the surface, they all look like Special Operation Forces. But if you take a golf ball and cut it open, you'll find that different golf balls are composed with different materials, making up different parts. I would like to think that the golf ball called the Tour 100 is a good example of special forces. Why? Because it is made up of 3 elements. Other golf balls just have 2 elements, but this one has 3 elements. And so it is with the Special Forces soldier. There is 3 elements that are key if you want to consider somebody to be a legitimate Special Forces. One is the core. The core. The core equates to the combat skills that a soldier brings with him when he comes to Special Forces. The combat skills, being able to fire your weapon, to maneuver, the warrior skills that he brings with him, his qualification within his field. That's the core. That's the foundation that we build on. Then there's another part to this. In a golf ball, it's a rubber string that is wound around that core. That centerpiece. That centerpiece equates to the training one gets in Special Forces skills, the medical training, or the engineers, or communications. Whatever your skill is, 18 Delta, 18 Echo, Charlie. And that's the second part to this equation. And then there's the outside cover. And that is only about 1 millimeter thick. The outside is white. Sometimes you have it in different colors. But it has little dimples on it. And it's a very important part of that golf ball. It's this outside cover that gives it its aerodynamics, its speed, and its flight trajectory. And so it is our outside cover that completes our Special Forces development. Now, the first 2 elements, the combat skills that you bring with you, the Special Forces skill that you acquire in the institution, are pretty well integrated. They're institutionalized in our community. And it's working pretty well. The outside part is something that we're still struggling with. And I wish we had it under much better control than we actually have it. But it is a critical element, because without that outside cover, and I'll get to that in a minute what it is, you are not Special Forces. I don't know what the hell you are, but you're not Special Forces. Get that straight to your head. Now, let's talk about that cover. Well, the first element that makes up this cover is motivation. A Special Forces soldier, regardless of rank, is a highly motivated individual. He's in this business because he wants to be in this business. No one here drafted you for this business. You're here because you made that choice. And you're choosing to stay and work in this field on a daily basis. You're highly motivated, for example, you chose to come in the Army. You chose this profession. You chose to jump out of an airplane. You chose to go to assessment and selection. And then you were told, yes, you have the quality that we want. And you had a choice there to say, well, I'm not so sure I want to do that. But you didn't do that. You chose to go to school and qualify as a Special Forces soldier. And now you actually chose to stay in and on a daily basis to do this kind of work. You're here because you like it. You're here because you believe in it. And you're here because you're a highly motivated individual. That is a very important part of our community. Motivation. I would hope somebody that is miserable and doesn't like it, you leave. We don't want you, and you shouldn't be miserable in this place. Do us a favor and leave. Do yourself a favor and leave. I would rather see a force that is a fraction of the size we have now. But everybody's here because they want to be here. Motivation.